Hello and welcome to EE333. I'm your instructor, Gregory Myers. In this video, we're going to take a look at wrapping a graphical user interface around our user class. Much like we did in our more complicated example, we're going to take a look at layering. What I mean by that is we're actually going to utilize both a panel and a frame. The panel is what is going to be wrapped around the user class, and then the frame is essentially what is going to drive the user panel. So to begin with, what I want us to do is I want us to add two new items to our user driver example. So we want to add a JPanel and in this case, what we're going to do is we're simply going to call it user panel. And we also want to go ahead and add a user frame. All right, we'll take just a second to reorganize NetBeans. And then to begin with, the first thing that we want to do then is we want to make sure and have the ability then to add the user panel onto the user frame. So before we do anything else, we'll go ahead and build our project. We want to go ahead and manage our palette, and we want to add from the project. This is our current user driver project. We want to be able to add both the user, we want to be able to add the user panel to the list of available components. We don't, for this example, we don't have to add the user frame because we're not going to be adding it anywhere else. But we would want to just be able to add the user panel. All right, so what this allows for us to do then is to be able to drag one of our user panels onto our user frame. And we'll get back to that in just a second. So let's start first with the user panel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split my screen. I'm actually going to put my user class over here on the right side, this so we can sort of follow along with the fields and the field names. And then in our user panel, I'm going to go ahead and close my user frame.java just so that avoid any sort of confusion. What we want to do is we want to be able to add each one of these elements right here. And so we'll bring our palette back up. Just keep in mind that we want to add essentially a text box for the ID, the first name, last name, address, city, state, and our status. So we'll handle the status a little bit differently because what we'll do there is we'll actually handle it as a combo box. But to begin with, what we want to do is we want to add a label. And we'll go ahead and give it a little bit of room. And we're going to edit the text. This one's going to be an ID. I'm not going to worry too much about changing the names of any of these labels. Those are less important, at least in this example, than the text fields are. But basically what we want to do then is we want to create then a companion text field. I'm going to make it fairly large, probably larger than it needs to be. I'm going to clear out the text in it. I'm also going to change the variable name so that we have something a little bit more friendly. I'm just going to simply call this one JTextID. As long as you keep consistent in your naming scheme, it doesn't matter too much. And then we're going to come along and we're going to keep doing this then for each one of our fields in our object. And so we have our first name. And I'm making the text a little bit more human friendly than our field names in our class. Once again, that's simply just a personal decision. But our names for our text fields, I'd like to keep reasonably consistent with the properties in our class. So in this case, it's going to be jtext first name. And at some point then what you can do is you can just simply copy and paste and have a little bit of fun with the layout here. Clean it up as you see fit. We might have too many here, but we'll come back and we'll figure that out. This will be our last name. If you go back to our user.java, you'll see that you need one for your address. The city. And the state. Now, the state, even though it's a string, we want to actually leverage a pop-up menu here. So let's go back to our panel. And what we want to do now is we want to add a combo box here. Pop-up menu, combo box, drop-down box. I'll use those names sort of interchangeably. And then the last field that we want to have here is going to be our status. Tell you what, since it's also going to be a combo box, I'm going to go ahead and just copy those two, going edit the text here. And then we'll change our variable name for the first one. You can just leave it as jcombo box, doesn't really matter, but either way, we're going to call this the jcombo state. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to go to the properties and you want to clear out the model. We're actually going to be programmatically adding it. And then likewise with the status here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and clean out the model. And we want to go ahead and change the variable name for this jcombo box to jcombo status. And then let's go through and we'll touch each one of our fields here. So that one is going to be then jtext last name. And then jtext address. And then jtext city. All right, resize our panel here. Probably the last thing that you might want to consider doing is maybe adding a border. Once again, that's just simply for aesthetics. And then close, save, and then we'll go ahead and build it. And now what you can do is you can come back to your user frame and you can add a user panel to your user frame. Now, what we want to do now is we want to have the user panel essentially be self-contained so that the user panel only knows about the user class or the user object. So basically, as we add fields to our user, we may have to come back and add fields to our user panel. But ideally, what should happen then is anywhere we have used our user panel, such as in the user frame, it will also automatically get updated. So basically, our user panel can be used in multiple locations, and we don't have to necessarily update it in multiple locations. We'll just update it in one location, and that is in the user panel.java. So the other thing that we want to add real quick is under the palette, what I want to do is I want to simply add now one more panel. This one we're going to just add manually. This is going to be what sort of drives our user panel. And in this particular one, what I want to do is I want to just add maybe a label. And let's go ahead and add a text field. And we'll go ahead and add a button. Try to adjust this as necessary here. And so this is going to simply be the input path. This right here will then be blank. We'll fill this in at runtime. And we're going to call this one JText input. And we're going to call this our import button. On the first example, we're going to focus on the import custom, and then we'll come back to our import XML. The last thing that you want to do is go ahead and change the name for the button to JButton import. And then we want to create a companion set of controls for the output. Right. And then lastly, we're going to call this one JButton export. Typo on my name here under my text, so we're going to change this to export. All right, and then once again, just for aesthetic reasons, we're going to come down here to the properties on this particular panel. We're going to also make it with a line border. Once again, just simply for aesthetic reasons. And this is where you can play around with this as much as you want to and make this look however you'd like for it to. All right, so hopefully you found this video useful. I'm going to build the functionality in additional videos. So this one was just to focus in on a couple of topics here. One is adding controls to a panel. The second one is essentially to create a custom panel that then can be added to a frame later on. Once again, hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to email me.